Welcome to the Meteor Instructional Best Practices webinar series. Meteor Education is a leading educational services partner working with education providers to help them create high-impact learning experiences. As one of the largest providers of learning spaces, including furnishings and interior design services, Meteor's focus is the integration of best practices for teaching and learning to drive inquiry-based instruction, effective use of modern classrooms, and increase student achievement. Today, we are going to explore reading fluency and automaticity. Did you know teachers need to provide a balance for students to practice reading fluency with automaticity and reading for comprehension? We know that fluency is the ability to read with sufficient ease and accuracy so that one can focus attention on the meaning and message of the text. We also know that if a reader has to spend too much time and energy figuring out what the words are, he or she will be unable to concentrate on what the words mean. On the other side of the scale, we know that the evolution of standards has required that students read and comprehend fluently and proficiently at higher reading levels starting in first grade. With that being said, we as educators have struggled with how do you do all of that? If we focus on fluency and automaticity first before we move into our comprehension, then our students have less of a chance to reach the higher reading levels within each grade level band. However, if we ignore fluency and focus on comprehension, thinking they will be able to just pick it up later, then we see that by the second grade, students bottom out and even fall behind. It's about a balance between the two, and the key becomes how we as educators strategically determine the purpose of reading, the selection of text, and specific strategies to address both simultaneously. As we deepen our understanding of fluency and comprehension, keep in mind Meteor's 5 principles: authentic inquiry, inclusiveness, respectful collaboration, rigor, and ownership. Each of these principles should be addressed when educators create a unit or lesson plan with the learning experience or task for students in mind. And in turn, these principles are also aligned to the research from John Hattie's Visible Learning book. We know that John Hattie's research resulted in specific indicators for success. As we take a look at this, we will notice that the following connect to reading fluency and automaticity: teacher expectations of students, student self-confidence, and complex task analysis. When we talk about learning experiences, what does that look like in the classroom? It is the teacher action, what the teacher is doing, and the types of tasks or activities that he or she creates for students to engage in, plus the student action, what the students are doing in the classroom. Educators need to create a balance of fluency and comprehension tasks in which students build a foundation for both. That leads into some deliberate actions that you can take to operationalize this delicate balance. Utilize fluid grouping or individualized instruction based on the purpose of the reading, fluency, or comprehension. Select appropriate text for desired purpose or outcome. Incorporate discrete vocabulary instruction focused on letter sound, blending, word parts, and related words. And use vocabulary in writing and in speaking. The first deliberate action is the suggested structure of fluid grouping based on the purpose of reading. There are times during the span of a week or so in which you will want to group students based on various purposes. The days of groups A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, red, green, or blue with the same grouping of students are no longer useful. As you assess students, you will need to change groupings daily or weekly depending on your purpose for the group. This applies to all grade levels and all content areas. There are times that you may want to group for fluency building or comprehension of at-level text, or vocabulary instruction and comprehension of stretch text. Being intentional and strategic with fluid grouping is critical structure to help move students to higher reading levels within the Lexile band for each grade. If part of your weekly routine is to group students for the purpose of building fluency in reading, then you may want to ask these 2 key questions to help you assess your students and create appropriate groups for these purposes. The first question is instruction required in either accuracy or building automaticity for letter sound and word reading skills, better known as sight words? For this question, it is critical to look beyond a simple score on any assessment, but best to identify general performance patterns to identify specific needs and to guide instruction. When assessing students' sound, letter, and word reading skills, teachers will want to look at test items to see which patterns best describes the student's responses. Not accurate, accurate but slow, fast but not accurate, or fluent. Keep in mind that accuracy must come first before building automaticity with skills. These types of assessments generally can be found within your primary instructional materials or through state or district assessments. The second question to ask yourself would be, is instruction required in either decoding accuracy or building reading fluency? Once again, you would use these general performance patterns to help you group students if your purpose is to work with targeted groups on specific skill building. Keep in mind it is all about being deliberate. You may have a student at the fluent reading level and you decide to focus on the not accurate and accurate but slow groups. You might at that point not meet with the fluent readers when working with fluency groups that time. Instead, those students could read independently using text of their choosing at their fluency text level. At another time, you may feel that it is critical to meet with all groups to hear them read at their fluency level. There is no secret or one-size solution. It is based on your students' needs and your purposeful intent. So, as stated, one possible purpose for fluid grouping might be focused on fluency with automaticity. We cannot ignore that piece and jump into comprehension, but as we mentioned earlier, there must be a balance between the two. So there will be times during the week that you will want to group students for comprehension skills and strategies. The best way to do this is by looking at the Lexile band within your grade level. For example, in 3rd grade, the Lexile band is 520 to 820. You can break this down by quarters to determine the appropriate Lexile levels when you select text for fluid groups. This leads into the next deliberate action, and that is selecting the right text to use with your fluid groups. This requires understanding of the 3 types of text levels that you will want to provide for your students and how to scaffold the text for each student. The 3 types of text are these: stretch text, which requires direct instruction; at-level text, which requires coaching from the teacher and student individual practice; and fluency text. This should be at the student's fluency level for practice without assistance. So when thinking about fluid groups for comprehension, you will certainly want to be deliberate with stretch and at-level text. Stretch text requires direct instruction, and so it's very important and a must for small fluid groups. Obviously, the stretch text will be a challenge for students and above their reading levels, so you will want to model and in some cases read the text aloud as students build their vocabulary and comprehension skills. The key is all students need exposure to their stretch text in order to progress along the Lexile chart. There may be times when you choose at-level text. You'd want to provide some text at that level so that students are able to read with coaching and guidance. This may not be a stretch text for students, but they still require the support of the teacher. Fluency text is the actual reading level that your student is comfortable reading. It could be higher or lower than the expected range for your grade level, depending on the student. The implications for you are the following. You will want to make sure that you are selecting text at each of the text levels, stretch, at-level, and fluency, for each unit of study. You will also need to keep in mind that for some students, the Lexile level for quarter 1 may be their stretch level, and therefore you can use this information for your fluid grouping. You need to include reading time for students every day to help to create the love for reading, and this should be at their fluency level or possibly above that if they are self-selecting. Studies show that self-selection or choice is a strong motivator. Based on this, it may become apparent that your primary instructional materials may not be enough to address all 3 types of text. It is certainly one of your key resources, but you may need to add to it. And on to our 3rd and 4th deliberate actions. These are possible strategies for you to incorporate into your fluid groups or as tasks for seat work. The 3rd deliberate action is to incorporate discrete vocabulary instruction based on fluency with automaticity and vocabulary instruction. Once again, keeping a balance in mind. When looking at fluency and automaticity, there is a sequence of instruction. You need to provide fluency practice to develop automaticity in each of the component skills beginning with letter-sound association to words and phrases to connected text. The next level of vocabulary instruction focuses on comprehension and perhaps more with Tier 2 and Tier 3 words, which are the academic and domain-specific vocabulary. It is important not to overwhelm students with lists and lists of vocabulary words, but to focus on identifying a small number of words critical to the understanding of a text or a series of texts within a unit of study. Depending on the grade level, it really is best to have anywhere from 5 to 12 words if you really want students to internalize the meaning and use in their daily conversations. A handful of strategies to decode text should be a part of a consistent classroom routine. Although the use of context, pictures, and text features is important to include, it cannot and should not be the only strategies to decode the text. Students need to be able to use the strategy of word parts, like prefixes, suffixes, and root words, along with related words such as synonyms and antonyms to decode meaning. These critical skills help to not only decode meaning, but to transfer to writing into the best word choice. We need to intensely teach these key vocabulary words over multiple days and throughout the unit. Words should be revisited on a daily basis through games, conversations, related text using the same vocabulary, and in student writing. There is no such thing as too much exposure to these key words. The fourth and last deliberate action is to use vocabulary in writing and speaking. Teachers need to model the use of vocabulary in conversations every day. It becomes important to teach students about code switching. We need to talk about formal and informal language and how school and work require formal language. The best way to explain this is to model formal language in the classroom through the development of vocabulary. Students should use the vocabulary in conversations and in their writing. This needs to be a very deliberate action and expectation. You must require students to speak in complete sentences at all times as they use the newly acquired vocabulary. Plus, quite often, the way students speak is transferred to the way they write. It is strongly suggested that teachers read aloud on a regular basis for all students. This allows students to hear language read fluently and proficiently. Additionally, another suggestion is for teachers to use choral reading as a strategy, especially when reading science or other technical text. Since students encounter domain-specific words, those Tier 3 words, in these types of texts, this can be a barrier to comprehension. Choral reading promotes practice and fluency. As you develop a routine or schedule for vocabulary investigation, you may want to use this schedule for an 8-day cycle as a model. Whether you use this as is or just as part of your unit of study, the key is to incorporate the components into your routine. The routine is as follows. Day 1, read and discuss text and present target academic words. Day 2, develop student-friendly definitions of target words. Day 3, provide opportunities to use words when speaking. Day 4, provide opportunities to use words in sentences and understand multiple meanings. Day 5, teach word parts. Day 6, provide opportunities to speak and listen to words. And on day 7 and 8, provide opportunities to use the vocabulary words when writing. You will find this sample routine in your resources. So in summary, as you begin to focus on reading fluency and automaticity, these deliberate actions can be included in your classroom routines. Utilize fluid grouping or individualized instruction based on the purpose of the reading, fluency or comprehension. Select appropriate text for desired purpose or outcome. Incorporate discrete vocabulary instruction focused on letter sound, blending, word parts, and related words. And use vocabulary in writing and speaking. Here are some questions for you and/or your team to discuss based on this short webinar. Do you change groupings in your classroom based on the intent of the task? How do you ensure students have exposure to all 3 levels of text, stretch, at level, and fluency? And what process do you use for vocabulary instruction? As you continue to learn more about this topic, there are some additional resources in the resource folder for you. This webinar series is brought to you by Meteor Education and the Center for College and Career Readiness. For more information about how Meteor Education can help you develop high-impact learning experiences, go to meteoreducation.com.